Big Four Operations Consulting. Interview Preparation. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into operations consulting interview preparation used across Big Four advisory teams. These questions come from interview patterns across Big Four firms and global capability centers. Kindly supplement with other learning material from Channel Operations. Consulting focuses on improving efficiency, reducing waste, optimizing processes, and strengthening end-to-end business performance. Let's begin. How do you conduct an end-to-end value stream analysis for a manufacturing or services process? I start by mapping each process step from request to delivery, including inputs, outputs, waiting time, handoffs, and rework. I identify value-added versus non-value-added steps. Then I measure cycle time, lead time, defects, and bottlenecks. Finally, I highlight improvement opportunities and quick wins. While answering, always include process mapping, waste identification, cycle time measurement, and improvement insights. A client faces long turnaround times. How do you identify bottlenecks using lean principles? I break the process into stages and measure cycle time, queue time, and WIP at each stage. I look for high variability, long queues, rework loops, and inconsistent workloads. I use tools like spaghetti diagrams and takt time comparison to pinpoint constraints. While answering, always include measurement, lean tools, bottleneck visibility, and improvement approach. How do you design a target operating model, TOM, for a multi-location business? I define the future state structure, roles, governance, digital tools, workflows, and performance KPIs. I align processes across locations using standardized templates. I design handoffs, escalation paths, and technology enablers to ensure consistency. While answering, always include future state vision, process alignment, technology integration, and governance. A company wants to reduce operational costs by 20%. How do you structure a cost optimization program? I break costs into major buckets: people, procurement, logistics, production, and overhead. I run cost diagnostics to identify inefficiencies. Then I design initiatives like automation, outsourcing, process redesign, and vendor negotiation. While answering, always include cost breakdown, diagnostics, prioritization, and governance. How do you evaluate process maturity across different business units? I use a structured maturity model, assessing process documentation, standardization, automation, governance, and performance metrics. I score each unit and identify gaps between current and leading practices. While answering, always include maturity criteria, scoring, comparison, and gap closure. A company experiences process variations across locations. How do you standardize processes? I compare process flows, identify variations, and classify them as value-adding versus legacy inconsistencies. I define a global standard and allow controlled localization only where legally required. While answering, always include variation mapping, standard creation, localization rules, and governance. How do you create KPIs and operational dashboards for performance management? I define KPIs tied to quality, cost, delivery, and safety. Then I design dashboards showing trends, targets, and deviations. I build drill downs for root cause visibility. While answering, always include KPI selection, visualization, trends, and insights. A client suffers from high defect rates. How do you apply Six Sigma to reduce defects? I run DMAIC: define, measure, analyze, improve, control. I measure defect types, analyze root causes using Pareto and fishbone, and test improvements using pilot runs. While answering, always include DMAIC steps, measurement, root cause tools, and controls. And How do you analyze process cycle time versus takt time? Cycle time is how long it takes to produce one unit. Takt time is the pace needed to meet demand. I compare them to determine whether the process can meet demand. If cycle equals takt, I find ways to rebalance workload. While answering, always include definitions, comparison, bottlenecks, and improvement levers. A client wants to automate manual processes. How do you identify automation candidates? I assess processes for rules-based logic, high volume, repetitive steps, and structured data. I evaluate feasibility, ROI, and complexity. While answering, always include criteria, feasibility, ROI, and prioritization. How do you structure a shared services or centralized operations model? I start by selecting processes suitable for centralization. I design roles, workflows, service levels, and governance. I build transition plans and training. While answering, always include process selection, structure design, SLAs, and transition planning. How do you assess warehouse layout and processes? I map inbound, storage, picking, packing, and outbound flows. I analyze travel time, slotting logic, picking methods, and equipment utilization. I look for congestion and non-value steps. While answering, always include layout mapping, flow analysis, slotting, and improvement. How do you evaluate supply chain resilience? I assess vulnerabilities like single-source suppliers, long lead times, geopolitical risks, and lack of visibility. I stress test scenarios and evaluate backup plans. While answering, always include risk mapping, scenario analysis, and mitigation levers. A business faces stockouts and excess inventory. How do you balance inventory levels? I review demand variability, safety stock settings, supplier performance, and planning accuracy. I rebalance inventory using segmentation and reorder logic. While answering, always include variability analysis, safety stock, segmentation, and control policies. How do you design a demand forecasting framework? I combine historical trends, seasonality, causal drivers, and qualitative inputs. I evaluate methods, moving average, exponential smoothing, regression, or ML models. While answering, always include data inputs, method selection, validation, and accuracy tracking. A company wants to adopt just-in-time JIT. How do you assess readiness? I assess process stability, supplier reliability, equipment uptime, and quality levels. JIT works only when variation is low and flow is predictable. While answering, always include stability, supplier performance, quality, and risks. How do you evaluate vendor performance and establish supplier scorecards? I define metrics like quality, delivery, responsiveness, cost, and risk. I set weightages, collect data, and publish scorecards regularly. While answering, always include metric selection, scoring, feedback, and governance. A client has high logistics costs. How do you analyze route optimization and freight management? I assess lane-wise costs, load factors, route efficiency, vehicle utilization, and carrier performance. I evaluate consolidation and multi-stop routes. While answering, always include cost breakdown, utilization, optimization levers, and negotiation. How do you redesign procurement processes to reduce costs and improve compliance? I map the current process, assess sourcing practices, analyze spend, and identify maverick buying. I implement category strategies, approvals, and automation. While answering, always include spend visibility, compliance issues, category strategy, and controls. A client has long quality inspection delays. How do you streamline quality controls? I assess inspection steps, tools, sampling techniques, and workflow bottlenecks. I redesign with risk-based sampling and digital checklists. While answering, always include process mapping, bottlenecks, risk-based approach, and digital tools. How do you perform root cause analysis using fishbone, 5Y, or Pareto? I gather defect data, categorize issues, and identify the biggest contributors with Pareto. Then I break down root causes using fishbone. Methods, machines, people, materials. While answering, always include data, tools, root causes, and corrective actions. A client wants to improve OEE. How do you structure an improvement plan? I break OEE into availability, performance, and quality. I measure losses, breakdowns, minor stops, speed loss, defects. Then I design targeted improvements. While answering, always include OEE components, loss analysis, and structured actions. How do you analyze make versus buy decisions using cost modeling? I compare internal production cost, labor, overhead, machine time, against vendor pricing. I add qualitative factors like quality, control, and risk. While answering, always include cost comparison, risk factors, quality, and recommendation. A business wants to optimize plant layout. How do you perform layout redesign? I map current flow, material movement, and space constraints. I reduce travel distance, improve safety, and align layout to production sequence. While answering, always include flow mapping, material movement, redesign principles, and risk checks. How do you calculate operational capacity and assess capacity constraints? I measure machine availability, cycle time, shifts, and planned downtime. I calculate effective capacity and identify bottleneck resources. While answering, always include capacity formula, constraints, bottlenecks, and load balancing. A company plans to scale operations rapidly. How do you evaluate operational scalability? I assess whether current processes, systems, people capacity, and governance can handle higher volume without breaking. I stress test workloads, review automation potential, and identify constraints like manual steps, limited vendor capacity, or outdated tools. While answering, always include scalability limits, bottlenecks, automation, and capacity modeling. How do you assess operational risks within core business processes? I identify failure points using process maps, FMEA, and historical incident analysis. I score risks on likelihood and impact. Then I design controls, preventive, detective, and mitigating, to strengthen reliability. While answering, always include risk identification, scoring, controls, and monitoring. A client wants to reduce rework costs. How do you identify sources of operational waste? I analyze defect logs, scrap reports, and process deviations. I run root cause sessions and observe frontline operations. Then I remove waste using lean tools such as standardization, checklists, and mistake proofing. While answering, always include waste identification, root cause, and lean reduction actions. How do you determine the right level of SOPs and process documentation? I balance detail with usability. Critical processes get step-by-step SOPs with controls. Routine tasks get simpler guides. I validate documentation with process owners and ensure version control. While answering, always include criticality, documentation depth, validation, and governance. A company suffers from siloed operations. How do you improve cross-functional collaboration? I map handoffs, identify misalignments, and define roles and RACI. I redesign workflows, create shared KPIs, and introduce integrated planning forums. While answering, Always include handoff mapping, alignment, shared KPIs, and governance forums. End. How do you conduct time motion studies to improve productivity? I observe tasks, measure time per activity, identify weighting, motion waste, and variability between employees. Then, I redesign workflow and standardize best practices. While answering, always include observation, measurement, variation, and improvement. A client wants to adopt RPA across operations. How do you evaluate feasibility and ROI? I assess process maturity, rules-based steps, data availability, and exception rates. I estimate time saved, cost avoided, and investment needed. While answering, always include feasibility criteria, effort versus benefit, and scalability. How do you assess digital maturity in operations and recommend digital tools? I evaluate current digital systems, automation levels, data availability, and integration gaps. I identify tools like IoT, MES, RPA, and analytics suited to their maturity stage. While answering, always include maturity assessment, gaps, and relevant digital solutions. A company experiences frequent supply chain disruptions. How do you build risk mitigation strategies? I map critical suppliers, routes, and plants. I design dual sourcing, inventory buffers, alternate routes, and scenario-based contingency plans. While answering, always include risk mapping, mitigation levers, and resilience steps. How do you compare alternative sourcing strategies, local versus global sourcing? I compare cost, lead time, reliability, geopolitical exposure, quality, and flexibility. I model total landed cost, including risk premiums. While answering, always include cost, risk, lead time, and total economic impact. A client wants to optimize SKU portfolio. How do you perform SKU rationalization? I analyze SKU profitability, demand variability, cannibalization, and operational complexity. I rank SKUs into keep, simplify, or eliminate. While answering, always include data analysis, segmentation, and removal decisions. How do you evaluate performance of a contract manufacturer? I review quality metrics, on-time delivery, cost competitiveness, compliance standards, and capacity flexibility. I conduct site visits and scorecard assessments. While answering, always include performance data, compliance, and governance. A client is struggling with customer complaints. How do you design a customer experience improvement plan? I categorize complaint drivers, analyze root causes, and redesign customer journeys. I set service KPIs and feedback loops to ensure continuous improvement. While answering, always include analysis, journey mapping, KPIs, and improvements. How do you run Kaizen workshops to drive rapid operational improvements? I bring cross-functional teams together, map problems, brainstorm fixes, pilot quick wins, and assign owners. Workshops focus on fast, actionable results. While answering, always include collaboration, root causes, quick wins, and follow-through. End. How do you measure and improve service levels in service-oriented businesses? I define SLAs and measure timeliness, accuracy, responsiveness, and customer satisfaction. I identify bottlenecks and standardize workflows. While answering, always include KPIs, analysis, process fixes, and monitoring. A company wants to move to an agile operating model. How do you assess operational readiness? I evaluate culture, decision speed, team structure, digital tools, and backlog practices. I identify where agility adds value and design pilot squads. While answering, always include readiness factors, pilot design, and scaling. How do you evaluate warehouse automation opportunities? ASRS, robotics, IoT. I assess throughput needs, order profiles, labor cost, error rates, and ROI. I determine which automation fits picking, packing, or replenishment requirements. While answering, always include needs analysis, technology choices, and ROI. Unquote. A business wants real-time visibility in operations. How do you design a control tower model? I define data sources, dashboards, alerts, and escalation workflows. I integrate systems so leadership gets real-time metrics like capacity, shipment status, and inventory. While answering, always include data integration, dashboards, alerts, and governance. How do you benchmark operational KPIs against industry standards? I collect internal performance data, compare with industry reports, and identify gaps in cost, quality, delivery, and speed. I recommend targets based on leading practices. While answering, always include data comparison, gap analysis, and target setting. A client wants to reduce carbon footprint in operations. How do you integrate sustainability into operations? I analyze energy usage, waste streams, logistics emissions, and packaging. I design initiatives like renewable energy, route optimization, and green procurement. While answering, always include baseline, levers, and sustainability KPIs. How do you assess process effectiveness using heat maps or maturity models? I create heat maps showing high-risk or low-performance areas. I score processes on control strength, efficiency, and automation level. While answering, always include scoring, visualization, and prioritization. A major transformation is underway. How do you manage change across operations? I build a change plan covering communication, training, role changes, governance, and hypercare support. I address frontline resistance early. While answering, always include communication, training, and people readiness. How do you evaluate the ROI for capital investments in operations projects? I calculate cost savings, throughput gains, labor reduction, and asset life. I compare with total investment, payback period, and NPV. While answering, always include cost benefit, financial modeling, and recommendation. How do you measure operational excellence maturity for an entire organization? I assess standardization, performance management, process control, continuous improvement culture, and digital maturity. I score each pillar and recommend actions. While answering, always include pillars, scoring, and improvement roadmap. How do you present operations improvement recommendations to CEOs and operations heads? I summarize findings using simple visuals, quantify benefits, outline risks, and present a phased roadmap. I highlight cost, speed, quality, and customer impact. While answering, always include insights, benefits, roadmap, and executive-level clarity. Thank you for watching, and if you liked our video, kindly press the like button and leave us a comment. This will help us reach a wider audience. Don't forget to check the playlist for more great learning.